and that's not why we have really come. I want to first start with paying my tribute to all those who are present here at 44 degrees when the university is on a holiday, on a weekday, to have a hall which is full even before the speakers come and arrive is something very unique to Delhi. I must take it that it's not because of our invitation, or it's not because of our organization, or perhaps this presence here is an endorsement of what the government has done in last 1 year. So I, without much ado, I would like to briefly put in perspective as to why we decided to do this. 6 months ago, we were here, and we had undertaken a similar exercise on assessing the performance of the government in the last 6 years, in 6 months. Perhaps we'll get an opportunity to make an assessment after 6 years also. But we did that for 6 months. And we had speakers who touched upon various other aspects. And we had then decided that perhaps we should try and meet when it's time for 1 year. And I'm really very happy to see that there are many others also who have taken the trouble to come here. My friend Sandeep here, Professor Saradindu Mukherjee, Brigadier Sondhi, and many others who have come here all the way to participate in this discussion. The objective of this exercise is to get together experts who have had major contributions in their field, who have made seminal interventions in the discourse, and to try and look at the topic from a different angle and from a different perspective. In a sense, the last 1 year has been crowded with achievements and with milestones. It's difficult for us also as a foundation or as a research team to keep up with the pace. But there have been certain very defining perspectives also, defining efforts which have emerged from this. Governance has become participatory in a sense. The concept of cooperative federalism is not or has not remained a concept in theory, but has had application, especially in the last 4 months. And if one were to look at the China visit and the formation of the regional leaders forum there, with the Prime Minister taking along with him 3 chief ministers, and there was an invitation for a 3rd chief minister also who could not somehow go, belonging to another dispensation, was proof enough. And the Prime Minister's speech at the Tsinghua University, since we are here, so I'm referring to that, where he distinctly tells his audience that you know as well as we do that states have to be partners in overall national development and that all decisions cannot be taken from Delhi. Decentralization, in a sense, which was again the core ideal of Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyay, whose birth anniversary will be soon celebrated, and who's obviously not a known figure because he's not into the usual, he doesn't fall into the usual framework. Decentralization was a core thesis, and the China visit, where the Prime Minister took along with him these chief ministers and inaugurated the first meeting of the regional forum's leader, is a clear emphasis of the decentralization process and the autonomy dimension being introduced into foreign policy. Anyway, I'll not get into much, and I would like to invite those who are better equipped to discuss these issues. And since we are still waiting for Mr. Suresh, we'll start with Sri Jaydev Ranade, who will give us an overview of the foreign policy approaches that took place in the last 1 year. And there have been many unique episodes that we have witnessed. So I would like to call upon you, sir, to kindly address the gathering and discuss your thoughts and ideas.
Thank you, Anirban. And it's indeed a privilege to be here and a pleasure to speak to all of you on a topic that I think has assumed importance particularly over the past year. India has been witness to an unusual burst of energy being put into its foreign and strategic policies in the last while. Our usual cautious approach, our usual, I will say, contemplative approach has been replaced by a certain dynamism that we have seen. And this has done two things. One, it has boosted confidence of the people, it has boosted the morale of the people in the country. And there is a feeling that, I would say it's a rekindling of the hope that we would move forward in terms of economy and acquiring international heft that we are looking for. The second is the manner in which the world today looks at us. I'm not trying to suggest that we've suddenly morphed into a really major power, but certainly the potential is now more visible to everyone else. And we are seeing it in the manner in which the heads of various states are wanting to interact with us. Certain relationships, of course, are crucial to how India moves ahead. And one thing I would say is that Prime Minister Modi's approach so far has been marked by pragmatism. There are a couple of points I would touch on here to highlight this pragmatic approach that he's got. But firstly, what he did do, and which I would say surprised a number of the watchers in India and abroad, was his attention to foreign policy, was his spelling out the key pillars of India's strategic policy over the next few years. That is certainly his thought. And this started from the time of his swearing-in ceremony. In fact, at the swearing-in ceremony, he invited the leaders of countries around us, and in the process, he signaled two or three things. One, that he is a prime minister who is going to interact directly with leaders of neighboring states. That he's a prime minister who is going to take certain steps in consultation with them to move the bilateral relationships ahead. Second, that he outlined the geographic perimeters of India's area of strategic interest. Basically, in a way, he also put China on notice because in a number of these places, our interests collide. And at the same time, he made it clear to these neighbors that India wants to take them along with us on our path to economic growth, and that they would benefit also as we rise. So these are the messages that he gave, which were received. And the element of pragmatism was evident in the manner in which the Pakistani Prime Minister was invited, Nawaz Sharif. The invitation extended to him earlier was not withdrawn, and Modi did meet him, receive him, despite the fact that the ISI mounted an attack through the Lashkar-e-Taiba on our consulate in Tehran. There is supportive evidence of what happened. There is enough evidence available in the intelligence world and with the governments as to who mounted the attack and how it was done. But there were some giveaways. When the attack happened, and the invitation was already with Nawaz Sharif, there was silence from Islamabad as to whether he's coming. It was only after the attack had failed, providentially, that Nawaz Sharif's daughter sent a tweet saying that they would be visiting Delhi. I think we could not have a clearer evidence of the fact that Nawaz Sharif and his people were waiting for the attack to fall, so that they failed, so that they could come here without embarrassment. Of course, when the swearing-in ceremony was underway, the Afghan President Karzai was here, and on Indian national TV, he again identified the Lashkar-e-Taiba backed by Pakistan as the perpetrators of that attack. I mentioned that only to say that Modi did not let it come in the way of his interaction with Nawaz Sharif. And in the course of the interaction, he once again held out the olive branch and also, of course, indicated certain red lines which Pakistan should not cross. Pakistan will be a problem for the Modi administration. It will be a challenge for the Modi administration as to how they tackle it. Similarly, the other major challenge, in my view, is China, which he's going to have to face. But before that, let's reel back a bit and have a look at what he has done. He travelled to the United States. There was a lot of apprehension among US diplomats and in the US that he will carry the baggage of the visa denial to him. He did not. He set that aside because he figured that engagement with one of the world's most powerful countries in terms of not only military might but capital and science and technological achievement is in India. And he did take that step forward. We all know the way that visit was managed, the reception that he got. And there were, of course, there was carping here that he's reaching out to the diaspora, Indian diaspora in the United States, whereas he should be addressing the US state and US government. Well, he did both. He did address the government, he also addressed the diaspora. And incidentally, the Indian diaspora worldwide is estimated to have capital assets worth almost $500 billion. That's a lot of money if we can try and get some of that invested back in. So that would have been one of his objectives very well. But more importantly was he had established a personal kind of rapport with Barack Obama, and that was on display when he sent a tweet inviting him to India for the Republic Day celebrations. It was the first time that a US president was invited, and he accepted also by tweet. Both bypassed their respective bureaucracies. I dare say that if the invitation had gone through the Indian bureaucracy and landed up with the US bureaucracy, the visit wouldn't have happened. But it did happen, it did materialize, and it was a major visit. It was unprecedented for the Americans. It was very unusual for us. For a US president to come here and spend so much time, as the American diplomats never failed to point out, in the open for over 2 hours at the parade, was something unprecedented. He doesn't do that in the United States. But more importantly, they signed a number of agreements. There were a number of comments that were made by both the leaders, which interspersed the visit. And among the agreements that were signed, I would identify the 4 Pathfinder defense agreements that were signed as probably among the most major. Apart, of course, from the unusually long vision statement, which is a 59-point vision statement that was spelled out. But why do I identify these defense projects? I'm not sort of talking about the drones, etc. Those things happen, others do it. But there are 2 really significant projects with far-reaching implications for India. One is the aircraft carrier technology, and the second is the jet engine. And just by way of benchmark, let me say that the maritime domain is where we are gearing up for a challenge in the future, where the other countries are also gearing up for a challenge in the future as some countries start building up their naval assets, particularly the Chinese. And for us to acquire aircraft carrier building technology and the new related technology, which is the catapult, etc., to get the aircraft to take off, and we are also examining the possibility of getting the Americans to cooperate. They haven't, of course, agreed to cooperate on building a nuclear fuel plant for the aircraft carrier. If that happens, it will be a major step. But that's why I called it a move with far-reaching implications. Because look at it this way: don't just look at it as an aircraft carrier which is being built. There is going to be a whole lot of Indian industries and defense industries which are going to be involved in that. So we will see across the board upgrading of Indian infrastructure capability, Indian industry capability, including precision machining, etc. And that's what we anticipate. A number of companies have already lined up to try and tap into this potential in this market, and hopefully the regulations, etc., will come through very quickly. The second is the jet engine. We haven't yet been able to fabricate one on our own. Most companies haven't been able to fabricate one on their own, except a very old model kind of jet engine. And therefore, if that comes through, it will be a major jump for us, not only in terms of the Indian Air Force, but also for our domestic passenger routes. So this is a major step that this government has taken. they've also, to my mind, dispelled any ambiguity about the orientation of Indo-US relations over the next few years, which is a major step, because we've always tried this one step forward and half a step backward, or two steps forward and one step backward. I think that is not happening now. The second thing is the homework that he did with the visits to Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and Japan, all countries of strategic and economic importance to us, where he has signed uranium deals and economic projects, etc., which are going to help us as the money starts coming in, industry starts benefiting, and we will start getting job creation, but again, more importantly, I would say, upgradation of the base level of our industry infrastructure. So these are key elements that he has put in place, and as we all know now, he had visited 16 countries before undertaking this visit to China, which again is very important. Before moving on to China, I must refer to Pakistan. It's an area where I personally have certain views, and I feel that the government could have been more consistent in the policies that it has taken. Pakistan has not been, it's been a volatile factor in our relationship. No matter what we do, over the years we have tried to extend the hand of friendship, we've tried to go more than halfway to satisfy their needs. Nothing has worked. Their basic policy, particularly since they started the proxy war in the 80s, has continued. And that seems to be continuing even now. Here we find today's situation a sort of a lift, upward lift in the amount of separatist activity that is taking place in Kashmir. There are also indications that the Pakistanis are preparing to push more of the religious consumes into India for terrorist activities, disruptive activities. And they have not pulled back or shied away from criticizing us, despite the fact that overtures have been made, including our foreign secretary going there on a visit. So what is the next step that this administration is going to take is something we'll have to wait and see. I expect that it would be deliberate and it would be well thought out. It may not necessarily be what we all want just yet, but I think then they will be figuring out ways of transmitting messages that we are very keen on a quiet border, and how that is to be achieved we will see. But with China, I think things have been slightly different. It is a major country, it's a huge country, and it's right on our border. Again, here the question is, which previous governments have also been doing, how do we deal with China? Is it that we should just buy peace every time? Or is it that we should not push them beyond the point for fear of provoking them? What should be the exact or the proper formula that we must adopt while dealing with this major country? They have their own baggage, they have their own views as far as we are concerned. And we're not discussing China, so I'm not going to go into it in detail, though of course I would love to personally, but I will restrain myself. We can separate that. But what we are seeing is two things are happening at the same time. Here we have Modi coming in as the Prime Minister, the BJP being elected for the first time in 30 years with a major, or any single party rather, why only BJP, with such a thumping majority. And they have a well-defined national outlook. The Prime Minister himself is reputed to be decisive, he is pragmatic, and he's a nationalist. In China, just a year earlier, when they had their 18th Congress, we saw the emergence of Xi Jinping. Again, a strong leader. He spelled out his vision for China, which is a very robust and muscular vision, make no mistake about it. And he's a strong leader, nationalist, unwilling to make any compromise. So here you have two strong nationalist leaders, and you have, of course, therefore, political pundits who say, well, maybe this is a chance where the two can strike a bargain and take a step forward. On the other hand, the two may also decide not to give and just dig their heels in. So let us see where it goes. The first game has been played with Modi's visit to China. in China, when I spoke about Xi Jinping's emergence and the kind of person he is, I must add also that what we see when we study China closely is a hardening of the Chinese. And this is something those of you at least who follow China would realize. It's a hardening that's taking place not only in the defense level, but across the board. So if we look at their social structure, if we look at the party, if we look at their propaganda apparatus and the security apparatus, there is a noticeable hardening that has been taking place over the past year, along with a concentration of powers and authority in the hands of Xi Jinping. So we are going to see both the countries standing on. And that brings me to, I think, the final point of my thing, and that is the latest China visit, which took place after Modi had visited 16 countries and laid the groundwork. He had not only started the process of strengthening our borders and the armed forces and the defense infrastructure, but he had also begun putting in place our strategic relationships with countries of importance in the world. And that's when he went. The Chinese also, the message was not lost to them. They do not want us to get closer to the United States, and they did pull out the stops. We saw it. Modi arriving in Xi'an, and you had a very festive kind of atmosphere being created at the airport for receiving him. The Chinese media lauded him and India before he arrived. So they also played that card. But they also flashed the same kind of message that Modi did, which is that we are trying to be friends, but we are not accepting whatever you say or trust. And we saw Xi Jinping visiting Pakistan just a few weeks before Modi arrived in Beijing. Now just imagine, had the roles been reversed, had Xi Jinping been coming here and they had that same relationship with Pakistan, I don't think our leaders would have gone to Pakistan. They would have waited till the visit was over. That's how we are probably. We should change that maybe, but that's how it is. But Xi Jinping went. Not only did he go, he also announced a $46 billion slew of projects. I'm not particularly concerned about that, because if we look at China's track record, less than 30% actually materializes. In fact, some people have done a calculation and they put the figure at around 6%. In the book, which has recently come out by Andrew Small, and he puts a figure of 6%, whatever, it's not going to be all that much. But what is worrying are two other things. First is a number of Chinese projects are already underway in the POK, Indian-Pakistan area. There are many more which now have been added. So, to my mind, it is an implicit legitimization of Pakistan's occupation of the Pakistan occupied Kashmir. And second, the number of those projects are also there, along with the Karakoram Highway in the sector that moves in de facto legitimizes Pakistan's secession, illegal secession of the Shaksgan Valley to China. So these are major steps. We did protest, but I think we protested late. Our protest should have been swifter. However, the fact is that this was not lost here, and as if to make a further point, the Chinese official news agency Xinhua also published an article by Nawaz Sharif just a day before Modi landed in Xi'an. But the point is that both the countries have signaled their, shall I say, positions as far as future negotiations are concerned, with the Chinese additionally signaling that they are not going to make any concessions on the border, that if concessions have to be made, they have to be made on the eastern sector. And as far as Modi is concerned, he has also signaled that China has to reconsider this approach. So that is the stage we are at today. Before I conclude, I would also say that normally when meetings like this are held, they're held, I mean, the people give governments 100 days honeymoon. Here we seem to have given it a year. I think that in itself spells out the fact that this government's popularity has not yet ebbed to the extent that normally government's popularity is ebbed. And I understand that opinion surveys still show Modi's popularity at around 60%, which is very good going considering that Obama and all had slumped to under 30. But this is a job which I think is being done very well in terms of foreign and national security policy so far. There are two parts points that still have to be played out. One, as I said, how do we recalibrate our relationship, particularly with the US, Pakistan and China? This is the main issue which will occupy this government for the next few years. And the second is, will the domestic environment be able to keep pace with what Modi has set in motion internationally? Will our bureaucracy and administrative machinery be able to get the rules in place? Will they be able to create a climate for business, for ease of business, as it is called, for foreign business and foreign investments to come into the country? So on that note, I'll conclude, of course, with thoughts for you. But I think we are basically looking at an optimistic scenario right now. Thank you.
Perhaps later you can maybe give a few some of your views on the Mongolia aspect of the visit. That would have been very interesting also. And thank you so much for this grand overview. And one thing that comes to my mind again as a layman, and I again refer to the Tsinghua University speech. It's very interesting, and perhaps it's the first time that an Indian Prime Minister has done this. The Prime Minister kept referring to the re-emergence of India and China. That there is no, and that message was very clear, that the last century was a century of alliances. This century is a century of interdependence. And therefore, the concept of alliances is an old concept. So I think it was a very clear message for whom it was intended. And this approach was that of an equal partnership and not that bigger and smaller kind of an approach. So very interesting. Thank you so much for this grand overview. And during discussions, I would like to come back to the Mongolia visit as well. I would like to request now Sri K.G. Sureshji to speak. We have him here already, and he'll give an overview of the concept of governance as it has shaped or evolved, especially in the last 1 year, from the point of view of attitude, discourse, and deliverable and performance. So over to you, K.G. Sureshji, and about half an hour, 20-25 minutes, whatever you're comfortable.
Thank you, Dr. Ganguly. First of all, my sincere apologies. Today is a very tight news day. We have had Mr. Jaitley's press conference of 1 year, and followed by our Mr. Arvind Kejriwal's press conference. So it was a very tight day. So I'm really sorry.
We are grateful to you. In this tightness, you managed to come.
But it's always a pleasure coming to JNU. I've earlier come, but I have not addressed it from this particular center. But of course, at some hostels, I've had the opportunity to address some of you, most of your seniors. Friends, Dr. Ganguly, my friend Nitin Gogole, and Ranade Saab, I've had the opportunity to listen partly what he has said, and of course that's not my domain, frankly speaking, but still, since I've been asked to give an overview, you see, I have with me all the documents. The documents from the government, the documents from the party, the documents from the opposition, and there are arguments and counter-arguments, allegations and counter-allegations, and of course statistics. And as a journalist, I have never been a great believer in government statistics. But I felt that more than the statistics, which people may have doubts about the credibility of the statistics, though it may come from the most credible institutions, I would like to look at a larger canvas, which as an observer, as a journalist, I have been closely observing over the last 1 year. And I would like to share them. I have some broad points which I want to discuss. Number one, till last year, I felt that there was a crisis of leadership. A crisis of leadership wherein a feeling of leaderlessness, if I may call it, was there. That a nation of 1 billion plus doesn't have a leader. There was no clarity. Who is the leader? Is it the UPA chairperson? Is it the Congress vice president? Is it the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister would always be saying that I am ready to, step down any time for the Congress Vice President to step in, and I am ready to serve under him. The Congress Vice President is not, very enthusiastic about taking the mantle of power, but at the same time he is very critical of the government. He tears to pieces certain legislations. The Congress President maintains a discreet silence. So there was a kind of a feeling that who is the leader of this? And this was a feeling across the world. That is India being represented by a leader? Does it have a leader? Every nation has, every country has. And a country of this size, a country with such a huge population, with such a huge potential, who represents it? You had ministers speaking in different voices, often contradicting each other. You had coalition, the pulls and pressures of coalition. So there was an indecisiveness, palpable. You can feel that somebody is not taking decisions. Decisions should be taken. Ministers, some of them were taking independent decisions, and the Prime Minister was not aware. I am absolutely convinced that as a person, the Prime Minister's integrity could not be questioned. But when you are the Prime Minister of the country, you are also equally responsible for the acts of omission and commission of your ministers. You cannot claim immunity, saying that I am personally clean. You are the leader. So there was confusion. Now, things are changing, or have changed. Rather, today, the issue that is being discussed is that why only one person is the leader? Why not others? Why there is not collective, that kind of. Though there are ministers who are taking decisions, who are taking very important decisions, who have a key role, but the leadership of the Prime Minister has been, both by the media and everybody, that today they feel that he is the only person who matters. So India has got a leader, and they immediately identify. There is no duality of, leadership, that who is the leader, is it the party president, is it the... Yes, India has a leader. Connected with that was the crisis of confidence. There was no confidence that this country can take on certain problems head-on. Obviously, it is related to leadership. You don't know whether this crisis can be handled, because most of the occasions you would see people just throwing up their hand and saying that, well, this cannot be done. Most of the decisions, including the Supreme Court directive to set up a special investigating team, SIT on black money, no decision were taken despite a Supreme Court directive. We will take a call. Everything was left to, we will take it later on. And indecisiveness, that was the hallmark. What you call in Hindi or Hindustani, Sarkar ka Iqbal, that a government exists, a government matters. There is a government which will listen, which will respond to a problem. that was not there. And when that was not there, there was a despondency. And this further aggravated the crisis. Today, the kind of decision making we are seeing, I will come to the criticism part later, subsequently. But today, what I am seeing is an immediate, spontaneous response from the government to various situations, not only at home, but also abroad. I'm sure, he is far more enlightened than me on this regard. Whether it is the water crisis in Maldives, the quake in Nepal, our own people getting stuck in Yemen, in Central Asia, in Iraq, the manner in which we responded showed that this government was immediate in responding to a crisis. Even if a hostage has been taken, say Father Alexis was taken in Afghanistan, the immediacy with which this issue was taken up and Father Alexis was brought back home reflected the kind of fast reflexes of this government, how quickly it responded to certain situations. And as I said, very important part of this is that I call it, there was no aerial governance. You have heard about aerial surveys. I would call it, earlier there used to be aerial governance. You would take a decision, okay, this is to be taken. But what is happening at the ground level? It is being directly monitored. The cabinet ministers are there on the ground in the agricultural fields of Uttar Pradesh after that hailstorm. Senior cabinet ministers were there in UP. They were asked to go to the ground. You had Home Minister Rajnath Singh. They were not taking aerial surveys, but they were walking down those paddy fields. And they were actually looking at the ground situation, what is happening. You have a minister, Mr. B.K. Singh, who was told to stay put till the last Indian is evacuated. To be there, ensure that, because it was not just an official directive, an assignment given, okay, do it, and the bureaucrat takes his own course. No, the minister was put in charge, you take care of this. Still, there are critics who say that the ministers don't get to do anything. In fact, the ministers are now, of course, being made to work. That's it. So, you have these ministers, whichever situation is there. Iraq, you had seen the NSA was there. And he was personally supervising the operation. All the nurses, they were from Kerala, where BJP doesn't have a single MLA. So it was not an electoral response. Rescuing Father Alexis would not fetch him any electoral benefits. But it was never seen from that prism. It was always India first, Indians first. And there the outreach was also there. Even in Nepal, the foreigners were rescued. Even in Yemen, many foreigners. They said that the US, the Americans were not able to, American government was not able to, get their people back home. But our forces helped them get back. So we were not just talking about, or rather begging for that rhetorical, a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. We showed it that we deserve it. We are there before the US, we are there, and look at the speech that the Prime Minister made in France. India has been the biggest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping exercise. And on account of that, our soldiers have become martyrs. They have lost their lives. Right from World War I. And it is based on that contribution that today we are asking for it. We are not saying that larger philosophical, issue of, oh, the UN needs an expanded council, so we should be accommodated in that, and we look for certification right from Burkina Faso to all those countries. Oh, would you support a UN permanent membership for India? No. We are looking at, we are saying, look, we are doing it on the ground. We are a responsible power. We are responding to situations and we are showing that magnanimity. Look at the land swap deal. I mean, only a neighbor who is magnanimous, who wants the best of relation, and this, I call it often the Modi doctrine. Wherein today we have a far more friendly neighborhood than ever before. I know there are elements in Bangladesh who may still oppose India. I know there are elements in Nepal who may still be opposed to India. But today, if they speak from their heart on the basis of logic and not emotion, not the basis of rhetoric, India has established itself as a friend in need. It has gone out of its way to help people in the neighborhood. Now, this is what I call, a large power actually showing that yes, we are a large power. We don't mind making a few concessions here and there. We are a big power. A big power is not by claiming we are a big power. What actually we are doing on the ground. Friends, when we talk about inclusiveness, generally, whenever we see debates, discourses, it is particularly with reference to some community or unfortunately that has been the way the discourse has taken place in this country. But here is this Prime Minister who does not, or this government, which does not talk about any particular community. It talks only about the 125 crore Indians. When it brings an insurance policy, a pension scheme, it is not for even the poorest of the poor or just the poor or the middle class. Even that is for all. So, today, one thing that everybody cribbed about is that in this country we don't have social security. So from an era of soaps, from an era of freebies, we are moving towards an era of empowerment, where the objective of the government is not to make people used to certain lollipops, things which are distributed free of cost. No, even for that insurance, you have to pay 12 rupees per annum. If the Jan Dhan Yojana has to be applicable, you have to operate it. If you don't operate it, you don't get that 5,000 rupees, that withdrawal facility that has been given to you. So it is empowerment, real empowerment, wherein you are not being given something, but you have to activate it, you have to put in money, you have to take out. It doesn't mean 5,000 rupees. It means 10 rupees, 20 rupees, 50 rupees, 100 rupees. For 12 rupees, that could have been given free of cost. But no. 1 rupee a month. The whole idea is to make them feel that to be part of that process. That if I am taking a service, I better pay for it, even if it is 1 rupee. Government does not mean freebies. And unfortunately, that has been the culture that we have had over the years. Distribute freebies and remain in power. Get the votes. But actual social empowerment, wherein today most of the people have their own bank accounts, gradually they will be covered by all the insurance schemes. They may be nominal amount, but the fact is that you can bank upon 2 lakh rupees. You will get it in the event of an accident. There is a minimum pension scheme. That's not 15 rupees or 20 rupees. That's a minimum of 1,000 rupees. And these are not statistics. Now, so a social security is a big change that I see being introduced in this country for the first time for all the citizens. Infrastructure. So many infrastructure projects were stuck up. Today the entire emphasis is on maximum infrastructure. Any talk of attracting investors, wooing investors would be totally meaningless if you don't have the adequate infrastructure to match up to the demands of the investors. And that is why there is this emphasis on infrastructure. So you have, and interestingly, one area which has been the most neglected because it has been electorally insignificant is the Northeast. No government is putting in the kind of money, has put in the kind of money that this government is putting. For the highways, for the railways, trains are moving into hitherto, where they have never, people have never seen a train unless they came to the, what is called the so-called mainland. There, new institutions, sports university is coming up in Manipur. The focus on the Northeast, so much so that a new exclusive new channel is being launched only for that. 2,000 crores for Nagaland, 5,000 crores for this, and they are being personally being monitored by the ministers. Now, Northeast, certainly for any party and for BJP certainly, except for Assam, there is not much of an electoral benefit or dividend if you give it. But still, Northeast, because that is a very, very important part of this country, which cannot be ignored. Nitin, my friend, is here. He will be dealing with the security and other aspects, and he is an authority. But still, certain things that I observed. He was there in one of the discussions we had organized on Rafale. This country was short of, fighter planes, and we were cribbing, and we were in a protracted, never-ending series of negotiations with one country after another on how to procure a fighter jet, and which was actually crippling the Air Force, its capabilities. So you have the Prime Minister going there and straight away picking up 36 fighters in a condition that they just have to fly in. No assembly, nothing. And immediately a requirement is, he said that we can come into the negotiations and other process, the details of it later on, subsequently. But first, we need this urgently, take a decision, we need those fighters. So, this is the same thing when it comes to building a mountain strike core, infrastructure projects right up to the border to ensure that airfields which were not being used till date or abandoned, which were critical, strategic, they are being reopened. Air Force flights now landing on the express highway. So that is the preparedness. That is what we are looking at. We are ready for a great neighborhood. We are ready for the Asian century, but we are ready for any eventualities. We are not doing it at the cost of this peace will not be compromised or subject to any compromise on our national security. This peace will be on the basis of our strength. It will not be a weak need peace. We will not be begging for peace. Peace, yes, we want, but we are prepared for war. So we have missiles which are being developed, tested regularly, and they are not meant for, I can assure you, Lahore. They are not looking just at Peshawar. They are looking at Shanghai and beyond. They can. They are intercontinental ballistic missiles. We are against war. No. Everywhere, wherever he goes, he gives the message of peace. But a peace where we are not seeking peace from a point of weakness, but from a point of strength. Friends, on the borders also, I have my friends in the armed forces who tell me that earlier our hands were tied and we were asked to fight a war. Today, those friends tell me that our hands have been free. And there is a tit for tat response on the borders. Obviously, the other side tried to scale it up, but they could not sustain it for long because the response was devastating for them. They just could not take it, and they gave up. That is the kind of response that is being given on the borders. And these are people who tell me from the ground. Friends, again coming to that inclusiveness, talking about 125 crore people, but at the same time, not indulging in any kind of vote bank politics. No appeasement which believes in cosmetic kind of benefits, not real benefits to the people who deserve it. Wherein the focus is on enhancing their skills. Look at Varanasi. Look at Muradabad. Who are the workers? Those who were so long used only as vote banks. The weavers of Varanasi, they are all benefiting from the Skill India, from the specialized programs. Who is benefiting? The Ustad scheme that is being promoted. Who is benefiting? In fact, I have had my reporters who went to Aligarh, and there they were saying that the lawmakers and others, they were saying that please ask the Prime Minister to implement those schemes here also. Why only our brothers in Varanasi and Muradabad are benefiting? Why not in Aligarh? Hamara ताले का industry भी खुल जाए. That is the kind of demand that is coming in. Much against what is being described. Earlier, the focus was not on that. The focus was on iftar parties, iftaris. There was a competition for iftar parties. Who will host a better, and who will have a better kebab, better biryani. That was the competition. That cosmetic politics that was being, and that was abhorred, shunned by the majority of the community. I call them the second largest majority. I don't subscribe to the theory of a minority. Minority may be 2%, 1%, but certainly not 15, 16% of the population. They are the second largest majority. They never subscribed, majority of the people, to this. But then they were forced. And the only good things that were being done for them all these years was that we will have iftar parties for you and go to Hajj. In India, we will not give you it. A real focus on development. That you will be treated at par. You will have the same benefits. The girl child there also will have the same benefit. This is inclusiveness. And but at the same time, You have the Prime Minister who is proud of his culture, who is not ashamed of his culture. He believes that rightfully so, that when he goes to US and presents a gift to the American president, it is Bhagavad Gita, which belongs to all of us in India. Because when the Bhagavad Gita was written, there were no communities in this country. We were all one. So it is a common legacy. Today Pakistan is searching for its legacy, its history. It is going back into Takshila. It is trying to trace its history. There are people. On March 23 in Lahore, meetings were held to commemorate Shahid-e-Azam Bhagat Singh. They want to tell the people there, the people are trying to establish that no, our history did not begin in 1947. Our history began thousands of years back. So, there is this pride, sense of pride. Just a couple of points. Very important aspect. Today, no state, at least in the last 1 year, I have heard any state talking about a stepmotherly treatment. Even Nitish Kumar, who parted ways when this recent instance of earthquake and before that the hailstorm happened, he was appreciative of the centre's response. He praised it. In UP, when there was a power crisis, immediately there is a response from the central government. From GST to every tax, now it is no more centralized. There is an attempt to give more funds to the states. Nobody talked about Team India. Team India meant the cricket team. Today, Team India means the Prime Minister and the Chief Ministers of all the states. That is Team India. The cooperative federalism. Because you have a Prime Minister who was a Chief Minister, who has seen the difficulties of being a Chief Minister, of heading a state. What are the problems faced by a state? Nobody understands it better than a Chief Minister. And when he came to occupy as the Prime Minister, he decided that no, enough. I've seen the sufferings of the Chief Ministers. I have to solve this. And in all the policies, the emphasis is on giving more powers to the state governments. Whether it is financial, whether it is legal. Of course, there are some states who are now going beyond that. We are seeing it in Delhi. That's a different debate. Friends, the Prime Minister is a great communicator. This is obviously in contrast to the 10 years where we never got to hear the Prime Minister. In fact, the criticism, if any, is that he speaks a little more than is required. But then, he believes in personal communication, not through the media. He reaches out to the people through Mann Ki Baat and All India Radio, which everybody thought would have to be abandoned the manner in which we abandoned Telegram a few years back, that it has become redundant. That AIR is now being heard. People used to listen to radio only when they wanted to listen to FM channels. But today, All India Radio is being heard. People from across the country are hearing, want to listen. And what a powerful medium he chose.
Making profit also.
Yes. You have websites, social media, through which the Prime Minister connects to the ordinary citizens of this country. Anybody can write and there is a response. He is on Twitter, he is on... in fact, earlier they used to have a spokesperson in the Prime Minister's office, a media advisor. Now they don't have one. So that is a kind of communication, outreach to the people. In the crowd, he will straight go into the crowd, talk to them, hold their hands, shake hands with them, play with them. So this, chemistry with the people, the personal touch that he gives. And just that feeling that being there, the Prime Minister is there, the government is there, that is there. Yes. In conclusion, because he came in the backdrop of, I would say, the absence of governance. There was a government, but there was no governance. And also because a lot of promises were made. Expectations are certainly very high. No doubt about it. And in 1 year, many steps have been taken at the macro level. But the trickling down in a country like India, massive country, huge infrastructure, red tapeism, bureaucrats, it will take some time. Some of the things have started showing results, the Jan Dhan and other things. But for visible changes, we need to wait a little more. I think that it would be really unfair that to hold a kangaroo court at 9 p.m. in the evening and dismiss this government. I think it would be really unfair. I think the government, within its limited time, within its limited whatever constraints it had, you have a Rajya Sabha where you don't have the majority, the requisite majority. You have a bureaucracy which is resistant to change. You have a system. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about the system. I was also an outsider. Only now I have become part of an organization. You can see a massive change in the work culture. No more do you see bureaucrats' car parked outside the golf club or the gymkhana during daytime. No way. I see them personally 14 hours a day, bureaucrats working, slogging it out there. There is a hard taskmaster sitting out there. And I'm sure that in the coming days, I don't want to get into slogans and all that. That's not my forte. But I can tell you that change is imminent. How far, how fast we would be able to see from the grounds is a matter of time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suresh ji, for giving us a grand aerial view of governance and yet making a compelling argument that this is not governance from the air, it's hands-on governance. And I think you have covered all aspects and made a very cogent case for why governance in India in the last 1 year has changed and changed for the better. And as you say, and we hope and we are certain that in the coming years, this will only pick up and only strengthen further. Thank you so much for covering all the dimensions and bringing in totally a new perspective and argument to this entire discussion. And now I would like to invite Nitin Gokhale. He otherwise also needs no introduction. He's going to one thing, I think all of you know that he's lived extensively and for many years in the Northeast. And so we were discussing, we have on and off this entire concept of Act East. He's covered Bangladesh-India relations extensively, so there's this entire land boundary agreement that took place. I think there's no better person than him to explain it. And especially on the defense front. He has covered defense for years together, and he was the first one to break the Rafale news. And he was also the first one to interview the current defense minister in a very free and frank interview that was aired on DD News. So I'll invite Nitin Gokhale to present his views.
Thank you, everyone. The difficulty of being the last speaker is always this, that one thinks whatever you wanted to, the points that you wanted to make have already been made. But nevertheless, Anirban has been a good shepherd in this discussion, and he's given me pointers to what I should be speaking, because the other two the predecessors have spoken, the speakers have spoken before me very eloquently and very cogently, as he mentioned. But let me start with a bit of an anecdote. I've been a journalist for a long time. I left active journalism only in December, about 5 months ago, after 32 years of active journalism. And one of the things that about 6 months ago, just before I was leaving, I was asking some of my friends in the bureaucracy, how is the change? Is there a change in the way the government works? And this is fairly high-level bureaucrats that one is talking about, who are additional secretaries and secretaries now to the government of India. And one of them, knowing my background, said, "Why don't you do one thing? If all of you know, there is a place called New Motibag. There is a colony of IAS bureaucrats, senior bureaucrats, IAS, IPS bureaucrats, which is near the railway museum in Motibag." He said, "Go there with your camera," and I was still with NDTV that time. He said, "Stand on that flyover which overlooks the New Motibag residential colony of senior officers, and be there between 8:30 and 8:45 in the morning. And you will see at least 30 to 35 white SX4s and ambassadors trooping out one after the other, headed to their respective offices, like a cavalcade." So I was intrigued, why is he saying that? And then he explained, he said, earlier you would not find people leaving together as if they had to be in office on time. They had their own timings. They would get to the office at 10 o'clock, somebody would get to office at 11 o'clock. They would go one by one. And I actually sent a camera person. I did not go myself, but I sent a camera person. I said, "Please stand there and see if this happens." And he actually caught this footage where we counted the cars that time. There were about 23 cars between 8:30 and 8:45 in the morning, trooping out of the New Motibag gate and headed towards South Block and North Block and Central District of Delhi. So it's just one indication of how people were taking their own jobs seriously. Maybe they were afraid, maybe they didn't want to annoy anybody, but that's beside the point. The very fact that people were going to their jobs as early as that was something indicative of some slight change in the way the governments function. The second anecdote also happened around the same time. I was in the transport bhavan with another bureaucrat friend, and it just happened that he called me at about 7 in the evening, and I was in the vicinity. So I said, he said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in press club there, which is also in the vicinity." He said, "Why don't you come across?" So I said, "Where? Should I come to New Motibag?" So he said, "No, I'm still in the office. It's just walking distance from the press club. It's on the Rafi Mark." So I went across, and around 7:30 we were sitting in the office, his chamber. He was the vigilance officer of that particular ministry. And so I said, "What are you doing here so late?" I thought all of you finished by about 5:30, and then there are evenings to be spent in different ways. So he said, "No, the minister is still sitting here. He's working. And because he's sitting there, the secretary is working. And because the secretary is working, the additional secretary is working, or at least sitting in his office. And I am a mere joint secretary, so I have to be also here. And because I am here, all the other class 3 and class 4 fellows are still here." So I said, "Well, this is some change." This was about 6 months ago. After that, I haven't been to these offices, so I don't know whether it has changed at all. But that is one indication of how people were at least pretending to work, if I take a very uncharitable view. I also believe personally that one of the reasons why the BJP lost badly in Delhi elections was also a backlash to this particular disciplined approach or the biometrics system that has been put in place for people to come on time. Because class 3 and 4 workers who come, they were very resentful, and I sense that when I used to go into these ministries, when you make the passes, they're sitting there, and when you chat with them, they would tell you that साहब बहुत जल्दी आना पड़ता है, वक्त पे आना पड़ता है, और जाने में बहुत देरी होती है, साहब लोग बैठे रहते हैं. So I believe that class of the voters in Delhi actually went against the government or the BJP that time. One of the reasons why BJP lost the election that time. Of course, there are other reasons which political pundits like Suresh will know better than me. But these are some of the stray thoughts that I had before I was coming here. And I said, I must share this with you. But to come back to more substantive issues of various things that have happened in the last 1 year or so, and I will sort of initially start with defense and then get on to internal security and other issues. Defense, as you know, was headed by India's longest-serving defense minister before Mr. Jaitley took over as defense and finance minister, and before Mr. Parikar took over in November, was headed by Mr. A.K. Anthony, who has the great distinction of being India's longest-serving defense minister. For 8.5 years, he was the defense minister of India. And you would think that in those 8.5 years, Indian defense would have really taken off, structural changes would have come. But when you look back, and I have written about this very openly, that here was this tenure and this era of the defense ministry under Mr. Anthony, in which the minister himself was the adversary of the ministry. And I'll explain when I say this. He was so afraid of taking any decision that any anonymous letter that came to him would serve to put a halt to a 3-year-long process of selection, trials, and finalization of a contract or acquisition of a weapon system, where firms and manufacturing companies from across the world have come and participated and have then gone back. Anonymous letters, anonymous complaints led to cancellation of several deals which were in the final stage of being clinched, and also blacklisting of half a dozen major defense manufacturing firms, which sent a signal to the world of defense, which is interconnected, which is a very small, if you want to call it politically incorrect word, incestuous world of defense manufacturing. It sent a signal that India does not have the capacity or the will or the inclination to absorb the latest technology or the will to spend money, despite the fact that there was money for the first 3 or 4 years of that tenure of Mr. Anthony. And the ministry had sunk into a level where there was free for all. The bureaucrats, as usual, were running the show. The services, and I'm talking about the military, the 3 services had their own problems. The leadership was divided in many cases, the top leadership. The leadership took decisions as they wanted and played favorites many a times. So basically there was a total chaos in the defense ministry. Now when this government came, Mr. Jaitley was the first one to say that I am here only as a temporary man, and I'm going to be here only for a while so that somebody else can take over. That took some time. It took about 6 months nearly for somebody else to come in, for some new person to come in. And again, when Mr. Parikar was chosen, he was a surprise to many. He is a newcomer to Delhi. He's never worked in Delhi before. He was a chief minister of a small state like Goa, although complex politically. And they brought him in. And the derision and the kind of remarks that I heard in the elites of Delhi, especially those who deal in arms and who are arms dealers and fixers in the defense ministry, was that they were very gleeful, basically, that here is this man who doesn't know anything, then we can run circles around him and let's see, we are in for good days. But as luck would have it, and to their great misfortune, this man is not only sharp, he's not only street smart, but he's also a technical man who is an IIT graduate, who understands technical issues, who's been a businessman himself, so understands what it means. Profit for him is not a dirty word. Profit, if done in a legitimate way, without fleecing the government of India, without wasting the taxpayers' money, he's willing to give that to, preferably to Indian companies. And that's where I think the change is coming in the defense ministry. There is a new defense procurement procedure which is being put in place. The earlier defense procurement procedure was a classic study in how not to get your contracts done. There was no flexibility, there was no openness, there was no transparency in that, and therefore all that you had to do was to point to that defense procurement procedure, some clause there, and say we can't do it. All the rules and regulations of the government are meant to solve issues, solve problems. So that is what is going to happen now. A committee has been appointed of experts who will suggest in the next, and from the day it was appointed, 45 days, within 45 days that committee will give its report. And 2 or 3 radical things are going to happen. Legal agents, legal representatives are going to be allowed to be appointed by defense manufacturing firms, who can say proudly that so and so XYZ is my representative here. So it eliminates the corruption, it eliminates the opaqueness that is there in defense deals, the influence that comes in from external factors, that eliminates, because you know exactly who is representing which company. That's going to come in. Blacklisting of companies is going to be in extreme cases only. Otherwise, there could be a graded blacklisting or a system of imposing fines on the companies that default or that make mistakes. That's going to be a change. And more important than anything else is going to be the Make in India concept, which means that India needs to become self-sufficient and self-reliant in defense equipment. It's a long haul. I'm not saying it's going to happen in 5 years, it's going to happen in 10 years. It might not even happen in 15 years. But you have to make a beginning somewhere. And that's where I think the change has come in the defense ministry. That in the last 6 to 7 months, all the clearances that have been done by the Defense Acquisition Council, the common thread is that all of this will be made in India in collaboration with maybe a foreign manufacturer. He may be a Russian, that company may be American, that company may be French. It doesn't matter, but it will be made in India. Now you'll ask me, and Anirban has talked about the Rafale deal, and so it contradicts. The Rafale, 36 Rafales being bought from France does not conform to what I am telling you, the Make in India concept. But then there is this flip side you must look at. Defense is something that you have to be prepared all the time. The defense forces have to be prepared all the time. All of you have heard of this saying, that the more you work in sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. And that you need to have your defense forces equipped all the time, equipped with a mix of 30% of old weaponry, 30% of weaponry which is not very old, and the rest of it which is extremely state of the art. But over the last 10 years, this mix had got completely one-sided. We were left with obsolete equipment. We were left with equipment which was out of date. We have Cheetah helicopters flying to Siachen, which are more than 40 years old. We have submarines which are more than 30 years old, and we are down to 9 or 10 submarines. We are running an aircraft carrier which is more than 60 years old, which was first bought from the UK and then refurbished, the INS Virat, which is life it's got over in 2012, and we are in 2015. But we are forced to run that aircraft carrier because we did not build or we did not buy an aircraft carrier in time, or we did not buy submarines in time. Similar was the case as far as the Air Force was concerned. the Air Force requires at the minimum what is called a 39 squadron strength for fighter jets. 39, a squadron generally has 18 aircraft in its what we call the order of battle, and in its kitty, let's say. So from that 39 required minimum, 45 is a very optimistic, very rosy picture. I'm not even going there. But 39 squadrons, we are down to 33 squadrons of fighter aircraft, and out of those 33, 15 are the variants of MiG-21 aircraft bought 40 years ago, bought 30 years ago, and they are going to be retiring in 2018. So the situation in the Air Force was critical, is still critical, and therefore, when Mr. Parikar came in, when he took the review of the what is called the MMRCA deal, the Medium Multi-Role Combat Aircraft deal, which was touted as the mother of all deals, 18 to 20 billion dollars in the world, which has never happened together. And when he took the review, he realized that no bureaucrat, no matter how upright and how well intentioned, is going to put a signature to that kind of a deal and that kind of an amount. That kind of a deal and that strategic decision has to come from the political leader or the political leadership. So he thought of this formula and this way, and he took this to the Prime Minister. And I know from what happened that time that 2 hours before the Prime Minister flew to France and Germany, there was a meeting between the 3 or 4 ministers that time, Mr. Parikar, Mr. Jaitley and Mr. Modi, and then this was put on the table, and it was said that there is no other alternative but to go for this. So Mr. Modi went there, and we know that announcement has been made. That deal will take about 2 months more to be finalized and the signature to be put to the contract really, but that is only a stopgap arrangement. What do we do next? Because we still need another 5 to 6 squadrons. That means 100 aircraft, fighter aircraft. And you just saw about 2 days ago there was the Sukhoi crash in Tezpur near in Assam. Now, Sukhoi is our frontline aircraft. We have 200 of them, and yet they are falling. There are some failings in it, so we have to take a look at it. The Air Force will take a look at it. So how do we get 100 more aircraft and quickly? So the decision to buy Rafale is one way of augmenting some strength. Then go for what is called the light combat aircraft, which is produced by or manufactured by the HAL, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, and have the Mark II, by fixing the problems in Mark I, which is already sort of being tested and operational. Initial clearance has been given by the Air Force. So that is one thing that they're doing as far as the Air Force is concerned. Deals worth or contracts worth 1 lakh crore rupees are now waiting to be signed in the next 6 months. And all of them will have to be done in India with a foreign partner maybe, or with Indian manufacturing. The Ordnance Factory Board, maybe the DRDO will start collaborating with other firms. But more than that, the important thing here is to create an ecosystem of technology and small-scale industry in places like Hyderabad, in Bangalore, in Delhi, in Pune, and get our engineers and our own people to start working on making India self-reliant and self-sufficient. He's cracked the whip on the HAL, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. He's cracked the whip on the OFB, the Ordnance Factory Board. He's cracked the whip on the DRDO, and has now started taking monthly meetings. Now, this is the problem which was there, that there was no accountability in these organizations. There were no review meetings. There were no progress reports being monitored at the highest level by the political level, and therefore they just did what they pleased. That is the change that has come in, and again, I mean, being a journalist, maybe I sound a little flippant when I give you these anecdotes, but these anecdotes are important straws in the wind to understand how things change. And this is again in the Defence Ministry, an army officer who works in the Military Operations Directorate. This was around August or September last year. We met at some dinner somewhere, and I said, "How are things there?" how are you doing now? Is there any change? He said, well, uh, Suresh spoke about freedom for the army and the armed forces at the border. But more than anything else, you need freedom at South Block, where the decisions are taken for acquisition, for buying things. So he said, there is some change I can discern in our counterparts in the civilian side. So I said, how do you say that? He said, earlier when we sent out a proposal for clearance in, say, June of this year, say June 2015, which concerned the infrastructure development on the border, let's say a road being built, strategic road being built by the Border Roads Organization. The clearance and the money would normally come just before Holi the next year, that is around March of 2016. If you look at Indian seasons, that's why I'm saying March of 2016. Normally, he said it would come just before Holi. That means you got just 15 days left and you have to spend that money in those 15 days. Used to be the normal tactic. So he said, but this time I was very surprised that I sent this file in end of June and I get a call from a civilian bureaucrat in the Defense Ministry in middle of July and says, just come across, we need to discuss this and I need to clear this file as quickly as possible. So this brigadier was really surprised. He said, this is some change. So he went across, and whatever queries were there were clarified. And so the brigadier asked him that, but what's the hurry? I mean, normally you all send this file back to us by some notings, and then you say, okay, you send it back to us, so another 3 months go, and then we'll come back with 3 more months. So he said, no. Earlier we used to clear the files just before Holi. Now we want to clear the files before Navratra, which is in October. So that is the change that has come in Defense Ministry, because there is some fear of accountability, some fear of being held accountable for something that you have not done. Also, Mr. Parikar has brought in one more thing. His mantra to his bureaucrats and to the military bureaucrats. I must also say this. I've been sort of little, making fun of the civilian bureaucrats. But let me tell you, the bureaucrats in uniform are sometimes more obdurate, not sometimes, many a times more obdurate than the civilian bureaucrats. The people who wear the uniform but are actually processing the files in the Defense Ministry. All of them have been told that cut your coat according to your cloth. That means there is no infinite resources available with India. We are still a developing country. There are other priorities. We have just 1.78% of the GDP available for defense. And therefore, you must not spend money indiscriminately and on issues or on projects that are not necessary immediately. And therefore, this decision, which you must have read in the papers and criticism that you must have heard about, is that he has scrapped the Mountain Strike Corps against China. It is not scrapping of the Mountain Strike Corps. He is only resizing it. And yesterday, in fact, there was a ABP news, some Shikhar Sammelan was there, and I was there. So I was asked whether you want to ask him a question. And I wanted a commitment from the Defense Minister on the Mountain Strike Corps, on what exactly is his position. So I asked him this question, that have you scrapped the Mountain Strike Corps as has been written about and has been talked about? He said, I have not scrapped the Mountain Strike Corps. I have only slowed it down. Because there's no point making unrealistic promises and say, okay, we will give you a Mountain Strike Corps in the next 8 years. The size of the Mountain Strike Corps will be 64,000 troops, 80,000 crores to be spent over the next 7 years, when the perfidy of the previous government is astonishing. That when they cleared the Mountain Strike Corps in July 2013, I think, with a great fanfare in the wake of the Depsang intrusion, they said, we've cleared the Mountain Strike Corps, which will take care of China now on the borders. They cleared the Mountain Strike Corps all right, but there were two parallel notes which had gone to the Cabinet Committee on Security. One was that the justification of the Mountain Strike Corps, why we need a Mountain Strike Corps, why we need additional troops, what it will contain. And one was a note clearing the specific funding of about 80,000 crores over the next 7 years. The second note was never cleared. The second proposal was never cleared by the Cabinet Committee on Security. All that was done was, okay, in principle, we give you clearance for the mountain strike force, go ahead. So for the next 1 year, from July or August 2013 till say August 2014, the army was using or cannibalizing, as I call it, the war wastage reserves or the reserves of all other units that are existing. They were taking the reserves from all other units and putting it into this new code, which means you are weakening your existing units and trying to equip something that you are raising now. That was Mr. Parikar came in and put a stop to it and said, let's slow down, let's build this mountain strike corps later, but first let's get our act together amongst what we are doing. And so spend resources judiciously. Don't expect infinite resources to be poured into defense, because defense, despite what we have around us, is still not the biggest priority. Should not be in a country like India, where we need to uplift so many poor people, so many underprivileged people to a certain level. So that realism is coming, that fiscal realism in defense. And Rafael, I've told you what it is. Several other criticism you will hear about, as I said, governance, that the concentration of power in the Prime Minister's office. In fact, I think The Economist has a cover story this week which says one-man band, showing the Prime Minister like the Amar Akbar Anthony and Amitabh Bachchan, others, wearing those drums and having all musical instruments on their body. They have shown him like that on the cover. But they have clearly not looked at ministers like Suresh Prabhu, Nitin Gadkari, Nirmala Sitharaman, Piyush Goyal, Arun Jaitley, Sushma Swaraj. All of these people are not only working efficiently, working silently, but are delivering results. I mean, look at the kind of money, as Suresh mentioned, in the Northeast. I was stationed in the Northeast for about 23 years, between 83 to 2006, reporting on that region. And each year we used to hear this, that so much money has come to Northeast, this road will be built, that road will be built, this railway will come. It had not happened. And it is going to be an uphill task to catch up for the neglect of so many years. And therefore, the priority that has been given for the Northeast is laudable. Priority that has been given for infrastructure projects, for defense in Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh is extremely welcome. Not a minute too late. Small airstrips, advanced landing grounds, strategic roads being built to get to the border quickly, and equipping the defense forces. All that is happening, and I'm sure in the next 1 year or so, we'll see all the result quickly. Coming to internal security, there is one complaint I have, is that the police reforms have not come in. Because your first line of defense in internal security, or even your law and order and law enforcement, is police. And unless police reforms, and by police reforms I don't mean just taking away the power of the politician to transfer a SP or other people. By police reforms I mean equipping the police, giving them living quarters, giving them facilities for their families to live properly, enhancing their pay and allowances, and also increasing their strength. Because today India, I think, has the lowest ratio of policemen to 1 lakh population. The United Nations mandated ratio of number of law enforcement personnel per 1 lakh people or 100,000 people is something like 225. That means you must have 225 policemen for a population of 1 lakh. We are down to 110, and we can see this. You know, these poor people. We are sitting in a AC room here and talking, but that police constable on the red signal or the signal, he's standing there for 8 hours, 9 hours in this heat, 44 degrees heat, and takes the flak. We curse him every time he stops us or he finds us. And as you can see in this latest episode where this lady got this policeman dismissed, the real story is not the full story. The real story is that she also hit him with the brick, and then he couldn't contain himself or control himself, and he was unfairly dismissed, I think. So these are the things that the government must do and the MHA must look at. Police modernization, police welfare, it should be a priority in internal security. It's something that they haven't really moved very quickly. Similarly, they haven't really shown us a comprehensive or a cohesive plan to tackle the left-wing extremism. It's still piecemeal, it's still ad hoc. I would like to see some progress there in the tackling of the left-wing extremism. And of course, spending the money judiciously again in police acquisition and other places. Politically, I don't want to get into any of the political issues. Yes, I was coming to that. Since I spoke briefly about the Northeast, why is Northeast important? Because I believe that Northeast is the bridge for India's journey to East and Southeast Asia. Unless Northeast is fixed, unless Northeast is made vibrant and brought at least at par with some of our less developed states in the mainland, we are not going to see the fruits of what Act East is going to be really beneficial to. One, because the connectivity needs to improve in the Northeast, which is now being undertaken on a war footing. There is also the transnational highways that are coming in from Myanmar and Bangladesh, which are going to link up Northeast. Also, the waterways are being efficiently used to transport, and if we can get our Bangladeshi friends to give us transit facilities through Bangladesh to connect northeastern states to West Bengal, then perhaps a lot of these problems of remoteness and connectivity that exist in the northeast will be taken care of. For instance, earlier, even now in fact, travelling from Agartala, which is the capital of Tripura, to Calcutta via the Chicken's Neck today takes by road about 5 days of continuous travel to come to Calcutta. If we get the transit, and which was the case earlier when India was one, when there was no Pakistan or India, or there was no India and Bangladesh, people from Agartala would come to Calcutta in an overnight journey of 12 hours. That is the way the geography is, and the links were cut off during partition. Similarly, the rail line in future, maybe in the next 5-6 years, if the rail line can be connected, people of Northeast from Mizoram and from Silchar and from Tripura can come to the mainland, as we call it, much quicker than what they can do right now. Similarly, sorry? Lumding, yeah. No, that is already there. Lumding, Govt is already there. I am talking about, say, Agartala to Calcutta. They need not come to Lumding. They can come via Bangladesh into Calcutta if they want to. If we get our transit rights in Bangladesh, which we hope Bangladesh will agree to. Similarly, finished goods and products from Northeast can go to Chittagong port, which is just 4 hours drive from Agartala, if we get the transit right. And similarly, lot of goods and requirements for the Northeast can come at Chittagong port, travel up to Agartala, and then come into Mizoram and Manipur and Nagaland. So that will be the benefit of Act East. And as we go along, hopefully there was this one rally done in 2001 called the ASEAN rally of the cars. It went from Mumbai or from Delhi, I think, went up right up to Singapore via Manipur, Myanmar, Thailand, and then went right up to through Thailand, went Laos, Cambodia, and went up to Singapore. So that's the dream, and Act East can actually become engine for growth for India's eastern region and the northeastern region, as well as countries like Myanmar and Bangladesh, and then further down if we can have those linkages. Therefore, there's a lot of hope, and if I mean journalists are prone to give these report cards, as Suresh said, the kangaroo courts and kangaroo courts at 9 o'clock, where 9 windows sit in a studio and talk about what is happening. Nation wants to know, but nation may not know because all of them don't watch that. But I would say, if I have to give marks, if I was a principal or a school teacher to give a marks to this government as a pupil, I would perhaps give about 7 out of 10 marks, because there is some work to do. It's a work in progress. Many things have been done. There is optimism. There is a lot of hope amongst people. So don't go by what you see in the popular narrative in the media, because there are agendas and there are inclinations and there are personal biases that come in. But generally, as somebody who's watching from the margins, I can say some of these things that I've said, and especially in defense, I am hopeful that there is at last a kind of a system in defense ministry where procrastination or delays are no longer a default option. That's all I can say, and I'll end on that note. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we added this third dimension to the discussion, and that was defense, because he was the right person to speak on. And throughout the discussion over the last few days, there's nobody who's actually focusing on defense and what has happened in that sector. And it's such a crucial sector. I need not spell it out, obviously.